Did the coronavirus pandemic begin in a Chinese lab? The U.S. investigates. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Did the coronavirus begin in a Chinese lab? The ongoing saga of the coronavirus, what I call the CCP virus, has taken a new twist. The U.S. is now investigating the possibility that the virus actually began in a Chinese government laboratory in Wuhan, not in a wet market.
At the start of the outbreak, this is where China directed the world's attention, suggesting that this Wuhan seafood market was the source of the novel coronavirus outbreak. U.S. intelligence officials tell CNN they are investigating another possible source, suggesting the virus may not have originated naturally as China has advertised, but rather that it possibly started in a Wuhan lab.
Okay, it's kind of an old twist. People have been talking about whether the coronavirus came from a lab since the CCP virus outbreak began. And it's often been dismissed as a conspiracy theory. But once in a while, conspiracy theories are true. In other words, they end up being investigative reporting, if you do the investigating part. It's not impossible for a virus to leak from a lab. In fact, small SARS outbreaks after the original one were caused by lab leaks in Beijing. But it's been harder to nail down whether this new coronavirus could have leaked from a lab. President Trump was asked about the Wuhan lab theory at a recent press conference, and Trump displayed his usual art of subtlety.
Have U.S. intelligence analysts told you that they think that the virus escaped from a Chinese research lab, that it was an...
Well, I can't tell you that. Have U.S. intelligence agents told me? I mean, what kind of a question is that?
Do you feel...
I can't. Do you want me to tell you? Oh, let me tell you what they told me. Look, they told me plenty. They told me plenty.
The lab in Wuhan, called the Wuhan Institute of Virology, obviously denies the accusation. In an interview with Chinese state-run media, the director of the lab said there is absolutely no way that the virus originated from our institute. Incidentally, the director of the lab is also the secretary of the lab's Communist Party committee. And it makes sense that the highest-ranking person in the lab would also head the lab's Communist Party committee. But when was the last time the Chinese Communist Party lied to us about the coronavirus? Anyway, the World Health Organization is backing up China's story, saying the coronavirus came from an animal, not a lab. And when was the last time the WHO lied to us about the coronavirus? Of course, the WHO was wrong, but that's just because they believed the Chinese Communist Party. I see a problem here. Back to the virus. Originally, it was thought to come from this wet market, but apparently there's no evidence the market sold bats or pangolins, the animals from which the virus is thought to have jumped to humans. And the bat species that carries it isn't found within 100 miles of Wuhan. So there's a potential hole in the wet market theory. And in 2018, U.S. diplomats in China who visited the Wuhan Institute of Virology warned of a serious shortage of appropriately trained technicians and investigators needed to safely operate this high-containment laboratory. And some of the Chinese Communist Party's actions are a bit suspicious. Well, okay, I need to narrow that down. How the party treated this specific lab in Wuhan was suspicious. In January, the Chinese military posted its top epidemiologist to the Wuhan lab. In February, Chinese leader Xi Jinping began talking about biosafety reforms in labs. That's an odd response to a coronavirus that supposedly came from a wet market. And as the U.S. began to investigate the origin of the coronavirus, the Communist Party began to heavily censor academic research about the origin of the virus. I mean, science and public health are always best served when communist officials are looking over scientists' work. Of course, if the coronavirus didn't begin in a lab, the Communist Party could clear its name by having outside scientists come look at the Wuhan lab and set the record straight. But, according to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, China is not allowing that.
We know that they've not permitted the world scientists to go into that laboratory to evaluate what took place there, what's happening there even as we speak.
And it's no longer just the US investigating if the coronavirus leaked from a lab. The UK is also looking into it. So is Australia. By the way, to make things even more confusing, there's another lab in Wuhan where a coronavirus could have leaked. It's the Wuhan CDC lab, and it's less than half a mile from the wet market. It doesn't get as much attention because it's only a level 2 biosafety lab and not a level 4 lab like the Wuhan Institute of Virology. However, the Wuhan CDC lab was definitely studying bat viruses, as we can see from this Chinese documentary from December 2019.
我们来做采集标本，然后做它携带的一个病毒的研究。
Wow, that was pretty intense. I bet they regret making that documentary. Now, to be clear, the US is not saying the CCP virus was man-made or an engineered biological weapon. Just because one of these labs may have been doing risky experiments on bat coronaviruses does not mean they were trying to make a bioweapon. And obviously, an uncontrollable coronavirus would be the world's stupidest bioweapon. And US officials noted that the intelligence community is also exploring a range of other theories regarding the origination of the virus. So they're not just looking into the lab leak theory. But they are also investigating to see if the virus may have accidentally leaked from a lab, which has a checkered history of safety problems. American embassy officials in Beijing made several visits to the research facility and sent 2 official warnings back to Washington in early 2018 about the lab's inadequate safety measures. This was at a time when researchers were conducting risky studies on coronaviruses from bats. So what do you get when you combine risky laboratory research with inadequate safety measures? An epidemic that totally came from a wet market. And if you say otherwise, you're a crazy conspiracist. Next, I'll answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army. Since YouTube has been hurting us with demonetization, the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army has stepped up. The viewers like you who help us keep up the fight of truthful, uncensored information by supporting China Uncensored through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Today's question comes from Coraline Algae. If enough Western countries pull manufacturing and investment out of China in the coming years, do you think the CCP will react aggressively, or do you think they will enact internal reforms to address Western concerns? Not that anyone can trust a thing they say. Very interesting question. I think the Chinese Communist Party is absolutely terrified of Western investment pulling out of China. That's a regime ender. So, how are they dealing with it? Well, we've seen an increase in surveillance. Now, they claim that's to combat the coronavirus, but I believe it's because the party is preparing for any social unrest that might arise from the economy going down the tubes. On the flip side, the Chinese regime will try to lure Western investment back to China. They'll make it sound like a sweet deal, just like they did when China joined the World Trade Organization. For more on that, check out my recent interview with Curtis Ellis called China is Hoarding the World's Medical Supplies. But I hope this time the world has wised up. Thanks for your question, Coraline. If you'd like to hear your question answered on the show, join the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army over at patreon.com/China Uncensored. Now, if you like hearing about all the ways China is affecting you, you're probably subscribed to China Uncensored. But did you know that YouTube has been secretly unsubscribing people? They're also not sending out notifications to everyone about new episodes. So make sure you subscribe, smash that like button, and share our episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.